Ishmael the one that the covenant is going to be fulfilled through? No, he's not. And you can read that more in Genesis 21. You can read about that more, how God says the covenant won't be fulfilled through Ishmael, but God made him a great nation. It didn't mess with God's plan. When you mess up, it doesn't mess with God's plan. Does it? He's so much bigger than that. He's so much bigger than your mess ups. He knows you're going to mess up. He knows you're human. He sees it. And he's bigger than it. It won't mess with his plan. You know, after Ishmael is born, God confirms his covenant with Abraham again in chapter 17. And this is where their names get changed from Abram to Abraham and Sarah to Sarah. And Sarah is included in the promise. For real this time. Not that she wasn't before, but God just took an extra effort to include her in the promise, saying, you are going to be the mother to many nations. He confirmed his promise again after they messed up. He confirmed his promise again. And in Genesis 21, verses 1 through 7, God delivered on his promise. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. And Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age. At the very time God had promised him, Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore. When his son Isaac was 8 years old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age? God came through on his promise. And you know what is so cool about God's promise? Don't miss this. When God fulfills his promises, he does it in a way that only he can. There is no way that Sarah had this baby on her own at the age of what? Well, Abram was 100, so maybe she was 90. You know, if their little plan had worked and Ishmael had been the one that the promise was going to come to, they could have, taken some credit for that, right? Because they, worked it out for God. Oh, God, just let me help you. I'll work it out. I know how your promise can come true in my life. I'll work it out for you. Don't worry, I got you covered. God's like, you don't have to get me covered. I got me covered already. He's like, I will work it out. You think your age is going to stop me? I said you're going to have a baby, and it's going to be a great nation. Guess what? You are going to have a baby, and it's going to be a great nation. Starting right here. And he fulfilled his promise that nobody could take any credit, only him. And when he fulfills his promise in your life, nobody else is going to be able to take credit. The only thing you're going to be able to do is be like, God did it. I can't even explain it. God did it. God did it. He's real. He worked in my life, and he did it. That's it. Bottom line. Done. That's it. You don't believe me? Well, I don't know what to tell you, because it's just true. No other explanation. That's how he rolls. That's how he works. You know, Isaac did become the father of a great nation, Israel. And you know, do you remember in chapter 12 when it said that all the nations, all the peoples of the world will be blessed through Abraham? They were, and they are, and that includes you and me, because Jesus came from the nation of Israel. Jesus came from the nation of Israel. And we are under a new covenant. We are under a new covenant. And it's found in Matthew 26, 27, and 28. And it says, this is Jesus talking. While they were eating, Jesus took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take and eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. And you, should you choose to believe it, are now a part of the new covenant. Jesus died. He died for you so that you could have forgiveness of the things you do wrong. All those oopses in your life, God says, I took care of it. I took care of it when I sent my son to die on the cross, and you can have forgiveness and it can be wiped clean. You can be part of the new covenant if you believe. You know, I looked up the word covenant, and there was a definition that kept coming up on multiple different online dictionary sites that really didn't sit well with me. And it has, so it says Bible, parentheses, and then it says an agreement between God and his people in which God makes certain promises and requires certain behavior for them in return. end of the deal, right? That's like the definition of covenant in the dictionary. And so they're relating that to God, but this is the deal, you guys. The one thing God requires of me is my belief. He requires my belief. He knows that all these things, certain behavior, from them in return, I will never come through on that. They're wrong. Dictionary.com, don't even try it. It's wrong. It's wrong. Because all he requires is belief. And we talked about, you remember a couple weeks ago when I talked, belief isn't just a mind thing, it's an actual turning from your ways, right? When Abraham believed, what did he do? What did he do in the very first time? What did he do when God said, hey, you got to get up from your land where you're living, you got to follow me, right? You got to move. He believed. What did that mean? He just stood there and said, I believe God. No, he had to actually move himself and follow God. So believing isn't just like, oh, I believe. It's like moving. You have to move. Belief is action. We have to follow God. But he does not expect us to do all of these things to fulfill our end of the covenant. He wants us to believe and to follow him with our lives, and everything else will come. And he knew we would mess up, and that's when he sent Jesus. You know, God's grace is all over the story of Abraham. It's all over the story of Abraham, because God fulfilled his promise, even though Abraham didn't always hold up his end of the deal, as the dictionary would say it. But Abraham did believe in God. He did. He believed. And God's grace is all over my life, and God's grace is all over your life, if you choose to believe it. You can be part of his covenant. Your oopses can be forgiven. God keeps his promises. His covenant plan will happen for those who believe. And the question is, does that include you? Have you chosen to believe the promises of God? And that Jesus died so you could be forgiven? And I have one more question. If you have believed that, who in your life needs to hear Genesis 15? Do not be afraid. I am your shield, your very great reward. Who needs to know that God is waiting to be their reward and their shield and their forgiver? Who is waiting in your life to hear and believe the promises of God? Let's pray. Dear Lord, I just thank you for your promises. I thank you for your character and how it's true the whole way through the Bible, that your grace shows up right here in Genesis 12. It shows up all over Abraham's life. Even though he messed up, even though he was unsure, you are faithful and you're true to show your promises and your love and your grace every single time. And you haven't changed. You still are showing up with your grace and your love and your forgiveness today. And you ask us to believe in you. You're begging it from us. Believe in me, you say. Believe, follow me. Just wait for the promises I have for you. And I ask that these people in this room, me included, that we will just believe your promises, and then we'll know that you want your promises to come true in our life, so that only you get the glory in amazing, awesome, crazy ways, just like in Abraham and Sarah's life. God, I ask for that right now, and I ask that you lay some people on our hearts that need to know your promises, need to know that there's hope, need to know that you have a plan. I ask for that, Lord. And I ask that we have the boldness to say, hey, guess what? I know this is crazy, but my God, he's got promises, and they're for you. Dear Jesus, please speak to our hearts. I thank you that you're in this place. In your name.